a lot of measuring to figure out that's the amount that I had to remove from the plastic holder to make the injector sit down deep enough into the head. So what I did was, you want to remove it from this end, so I basically scribed the mark. You can see that there. Okay, you see that little line there? I don't know if it's coming out. Anyway, take that scribe mark, come over to the sander, right? Back and forth, roll it over. Back and forth, roll it over. Do that carefully, applying even pressure. Get in right to the mark, and then of course I set this to the correct depth I wanted it to be, reset to 0, and then checked to make sure that I removed the correct amount that was remaining was right. So all that was done on 6 of these things. This is the end result. Get a flashlight so you can see better. So those are the narrowed plastic insulators. They're a lot easier to work with than the aluminum and plastic combination ones. Jeff had some extra of those, so we just use that. A lot easier to work with. Clocking the injectors is critical because you have the rail mount, you have the actual injector plug itself that has to work in there. So I used the test tool, installed and then made sure it would clock properly so that when I tighten these screws up that hold the injectors into the head, that you would still be able to get the wiring harness on. So that's all fairly critical. I used 2 of these screws. I'm not going to use the third one here. It's not needed because they're not. All this bar has to do is sit mounted on the tops of those injectors. I put a washer underneath these to get that spacement, fitment just right, so it wasn't pre-stressing the injectors up or down. So again, the rail function is only to feed the injector with those O-ring type fittings. The plastic insulator is what holds the injector firmly into the head and compresses the little ring, the little rubber seal that makes sure you won't have any air leaks out through there, right in there. So when you soak down, the way I found originally was I put soapy water there and then try to put compressed air into the intake, and it was, after sealing everything up, you could see soap bubbles just pouring. You could actually hear it pouring out of there. That's how bad it was. Here's an example of the difference in size of the insulators. I don't know if this will show up on the camera or not. Let's see if I can get a good comparison here. Can you see that? It goes like that. I don't think that's going to come out on the camera. Let me try to set it up here. Stand by. I think you can see it there. See, that's the 1500s that came off. That sinks the injector into the head deep enough for it to seal properly. Fortunately, either those holes are not blind holes or through hole or whatever, or they're just tapped deep enough. I didn't have to do anything to the injector mount screws. I put some Never Seeds on it, some anti-seize compound, just so they'd be easy to come out. But they threaded all the way in without bottoming out or anything weird like that. But anyway, so where are we now? Well, the rail is done. All the plumbing is hooked up. The oil feed is done. The starter's on. Probably the only thing I really have to do is I could actually install my spare wiring harness, the one that does a 280 and the 300ZX. Install that. The only thing I don't have rigged up is a pump and fuel source. And obviously an ignition switch. So I'll probably get an ignition switch, mount it to this. I don't want to have to mess around with that. So I'll get an ignition switch that gives me a on and a start signal, and I'll get to use my existing wire harness, and I'll have to figure out a pump. I think Jeff gave me a pump. I'll have to dig through his stash over there and see if I can find it, but I'm pretty sure there's a fuel pump in there of some kind. I'll look into that, so make that work. I think I have to move have to get the 300ZX chopper wheel. I'm going to install that in here. I think this is still the 280. I have an extra one, that's no problem. So that'll be easy to work. I actually think this is my distributor. that I had, and I got Jeff's over on my engine, so we got a little, we're doing some sharing here. But yeah, it's real close to being ready to crank up and hear it run for the first time. But this was a major accomplishment. And then there was a comment on the earlier post about, why don't you just use the regular top feed injectors with the standard fuel rail? Well, that's fine, but there's a couple goals here. One is to see if we can use these kind of injectors. Frankly, there's more. I think there's more of a variety. This is a newer version with the O-ring seals. And also, it's fairly easy to install these. All easier to install these than those. Maybe not so much with the complication of having to use the injector mount and the rail, but it's not that hard. But the main reason we did it is the flow rate is different. These are a higher flow rate. Maybe we could have gotten the other kind of higher flow rate. I don't know. But these are higher flow rate, and this has been a tested, known thing. Some of the forums already post about using these styles. And the idea here is if we can use the higher flow rate here, the adjustable pressure feed here, and the 300ZX, this is a 280ZX, remember a 300ZX with the MAF sensor, which is, do I have one of those out over here? Right here, okay. Then hopefully, and Jeff wants to install it on a higher compression cylinders too. This is just his test base. But the idea is that do that, and I'm going to also recommend to Jeff that maybe he upgrade to a T3, T4 hybrid turbo. I don't know if you need that or not, but it'd be nice to be able to bump that up to at least, I don't know, maybe I'll go to like 10 PSI or even a little bit better. I think you can go up to about 10 PSI without having to worry about grenading the engine with the 300ZX computer. Anyway, there's a lot of stuff going on. Jeff's engine is definitely not going to be a stock turbo setup though, with the MAF, the injectors, the higher pressure fuel regulator. My recommendation of maybe a higher volume turbo. Should be interesting. Should be a fun setup. I don't know what we're shooting for in way of horsepower. I'd like to see 250 out of it. I think that's a realistic goal with all these upgrades we're talking about doing. Maybe more, I don't know. I think the stock engine is set up for about 200 horsepower, but that's with the smaller injectors, the 7 PSI, and the flapper style airflow meter rather than a MAF, which has better airflow characteristics. Anyway, that's all for now. I just wanted to get you an update on how those injectors went in. They're really nice and solid, and they absolutely do not leak. You can blow air and it'll hold pressure in that engine like it's blowing up a balloon. It'll blow right back when you release, so that's really great. Anyway, that's all. Oh, one little tip I found when I was pressurizing the engine initially, I heard I had a massive air leak. I forgot I didn't have the distributor installed, and it was leaking air right out of the front cover, right through here. Anyway, that's just something to think about if you're ever doing these kind of tests. Make sure your distributor is installed with a proper gasket to seal it up so you're not losing air through the distributor. That's all for now. Thanks.